Can you talk about the some of the hats you wore at that command?
Yes. I mean, so one was I ran a pipeline of education where we transitioned operators, if you will, to operatives, right? And at the time, it's like, it was kind of like new and unheard of because you would think an operator would be the exact opposite of an operative, and when I say operator, I mean you're wearing body armor, night vision, you've got your gun, you're kicking doors in, and you're shooting people in the face kind of stuff. And an operative is literally the opposite of that. You're not working in a team environment. You're working more solo and independent or in pairs, and you're wearing business casual, you're flying business class, and you're doing what you and your 22 buddies used to do, but now you're doing it by yourself, right? But for me, I felt like taking operators and turning them into operative was the best, even though there was a lot of people that said, no, that's a horrible idea. I felt like it was a great idea because taking a combat experienced guy that's already got basic soldiering skills, fieldcraft, and now you give him offensive and defensive tradecraft, holy fuck, you've got a tool that is far more superior than the Harvard graduate that you grab, and then you give him some just tradecraft without the soldiering skills, without the fieldcraft, without the combat experience, and expect him to pull off shit that takes balls, takes courage. Those are things that you don't just get in, a 6-month school. Those are things that you figure out over time, because that is what you're getting when you take an operator and put him in an operative kind of place. Yeah. And so that pipeline was one thing. And when I wasn't doing that, then I was deploying and using skills. And literally at the beginning, I didn't even know what the hell I was doing, right? I just got lucky to be put in this position and go overseas, go figure it out, and then come back, literally take my lessons learned and implement them directly into the next training that the next set of guys were coming through. Yeah. And then I would go deploy again and take those lessons learned and put them right back into the training. And eventually the pipeline became a standard, and then was eventually went from a Naval Special Warfare specific program, got funded, and then was recognized by SOCOM and became a SOCOM course of instruction. So it was my baby for the longest time. And then a particular set of skills taught in that pipeline then became my specialty, which is CMOE. And CMOE stands for Clandestine Methods of Entry, which is, basically getting in and out of targets, leaving zero attribution to the United States government, which is the covert side, and zero forensics, which is the clandestine side, and not connecting it to myself or to, our great country. And so, you go out and you do one or two and you get some successes. And then after that, there was only me and really another guy that were kind of doing it regularly. And then once you get those successes, then all of a sudden, everyone's throwing all kinds of work at you. Yeah. And I had the opportunity to, basically get in and out of structures, vehicles, vessels, and containers. And to my knowledge, there aren't too many other team guys or SEALs that had the opportunity to get in and get out of all of the different things we trained to. And I would say that CMOE is probably one of the most intricate operations you pull off, because it requires like an intense amount of surveillance. Like you have to identify all the key holders to the target. That's if there's a landlord, you have to know who the landlord is and where do they live, and then make sure you've got eyes on them to learn their pattern of life. And that's the outer layer of the target, right, is the landlord scenario. Yeah. Then you have housekeeping, right? If they have housekeepers, okay, do they have keys? Where do they live? Put them under surveillance, okay? And you work your way all the way to the person who lives in that target or drives that target or visits that target. And so you've got to have a lot of knowledge before you even think about going into the target. And then you have close target reconnaissance, which is now, okay, we've got all the key holders identified. Now we've got to go, what obstacles are we going to face when we get to this target? You know, your world of dogs, holy shit. You know, that's going to be like a borderline no-go, but it depends, right? You got to sit and you got to watch the target. Alarm systems, holy shit, another big ass world. I remember visiting, you know, the FBI, and they have I think it's 60,000 square foot warehouse of every alarm panel that this world has to offer. And it's like a library of alarm panels, you know, in a library of infrared, like passive motion sensors, and a library of door sensors, and a library. So just imagine this shelves and shelves and walls and walls. And that's when you walk into a place like that, that's when you realize, like, oh, this is a full-time job. Just this piece, understanding and knowing alarm systems. And then you have locks. There was a target I went to that made me realize you have to understand colonization of an area. Who would have thought? A SEAL going, what's the history of this country? What is the colonization of this country? Oh, well, you can go up to the door and there's an Italian lock. There's a British, you know, like basically a British standard lock. And then there's a 5-pin tumbler, all on one door, right? And you have to assume all three are being used, and all three work very different than the other, right? They're all completely different lock systems. So you're like, holy shit, I didn't expect that. Go back, start doing some studying, start going, hey, call up your Brits, my buddies over there, and go, hey, we need to come over and, you know, learn these British standard locks, because they are a pain in the ass. Now, for them, it's no big deal.
You put them on a quick set or a Schlaggy or whatever, and they're like, what the fuck?
Right. Now, 5-pin tumblers for them, you know, is probably, you know, it's a less of a question mark than British standard locks. You know, those are old school, what you see skeleton keys are used for, you know, and they have these big, you know, they're not pins. They're like these plates inside that move at different heights. And it's a totally different way to try and get past a British standard lock than it is a 5-pin tumbler that we're used to here in the United States. But bottom line is, when you really look at how much there is that you have to collect, it's almost overwhelming. And, you know, and that's not even counting the target themselves. So, you know, when you look at the target, you know, the human going in and out of that vehicle, that structure, that container, that vessel, you know, it becomes kind of the
smallest piece,
the smaller piece, you know, because you really have to understand that neighborhood, that harbor, that skyscraper, and then you narrow it in, but you're keeping track of everything the whole time. So that's why I started with saying it's one of the most challenging operations to pull off and maintain a level of covertness and clandestine that's out there. I mean, at least in my experience, it was one of the most challenging, but also probably one of the most fucking adrenaline flowing, fucking, it's one of the coolest damn things.
Makes everything else seem fucking boring.
You go in and you're like, holy shit, you know, and it's just you, and all that success and all that failure is always 1 second away from, you know, being your greatest or your worst moment. I mean, it's like,
and it's all on your shoulders alone.
It's a lot of times it's all on you. You know, if you get lucky, you know, there was times when you got, you know, maybe some other forces or partner nations that could help out on the surveillance side, but it's a lot of work. And so I had the opportunities of deploying and doing that type of stuff in different capacities. You know, that it's definitely the most gratifying, satisfying thing you could do.
Yeah. Have you kept track or have a ballpark idea of about how many of those real world scenarios that you participated in?
I mean, dozens, probably, if I really thought about it. Like, there was times when I'd go for, you know, let's say a 3 to 6 month block, but that whole time, you're targeting specific things, and that information sometimes leads basically from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, So when I would leave the United States, a lot of times it started with maybe one or two things that needed to be accomplished. But then while you're there, it turns out that it turns into, a half a dozen things that need to get done in order to achieve the one.
Right.
Right. There was, a moment when, just being in country, there was some human guys that were like, hey, we just have some sources we need vetted. We don't know if they're on our side or on the bad guy's side. Do you think you could, get into his vehicle and take a look around? I'm like, sure. Like that was just spontaneous crap, right? Or, hey, he's coming to like, let's say this certain hotel, and we're going to go ahead and, give him the quick search, and his briefcase or messenger bag will be put over here. Do you think you can get into those and see what you find? Sure. Right. So there would be these oddball, weird little things that would sometimes pop up just for the nature of work that I was there to do. And if they knew about it, then they'd be like, hey, can you help us on this and help us on? And before you know it, you've racked up a dozen little itty bitty CMOE operations that I would have never predicted,
Did any of those little ones turn into like just the total fucking lucked out, like, holy shit, this is this guy and he's connected to this guy? Were there any of those like total just lucky moments that way?
No, I wouldn't say lucky. I mean, there were definitely moments when...
Or big ticket people that you're like, holy shit.
Yeah. There was one time I had no idea, just kind of today being the anniversary of bin Laden getting whacked, today, right? What's today? May
2nd.
Yeah. As soon as he died, then a guy named AAA became the next target. He became the number one guy. And that's Anwar al-Awlaki. And, this is a guy that, if you really look into his background, you and I could have been in a 7-Eleven at any given moment in time in San Diego, and he could have been standing in line with us, right? Yeah. He lived amongst us during our time on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy to think about,
nuts.
right?
Yeah.
And he's a U.S. educated U.S. citizen, right? But he was Yemenis, and he was one of the surprise targets I got to operate against, and was successful, but it was also very controversial, right? Because Obama decided, we're going to go ahead and kill this dude. And it was literally the first U.S. citizen.
Without a trial, without.
Right. It was like, but he was gone from number 2 to number 1 of Al-Qaeda. Where Anwar is mostly known is through his YouTube videos, right? He was the guy that was literally leveraging social platforms to radicalize people all over the world, so all of his videos were online there for the longest time. And he is actually he was more responsible for terrorist attacks than anyone else in AQ history because of his reach through the internet, right? If you look at what was it? Fort Sam Houston, was it Fort Sam, where you had the colonel go and start shooting people, and we've had the Boston.
It was Fort Hood.
Fort Hood, and then you had the Boston Marathon bombing. If you take and look at all of these individual acts of terrorism in the United States, they are connected back to Anwar al-Awlaki. Yeah. It's crazy, but having the opportunity to operate against him, and even early on with bin Laden, he had a fleet of vessels that, I think he had roughly 20 plus vessels that I had the opportunity to operate against. And that was during the time span when everybody was, operating against bin Laden. The entire United States government was operating against the guy. But, I've had those little moments that were pretty cool because it was big name targets, and you're like, all right, this is That's the kind of stuff you sign up for. That's the kind of stuff that
the
makes you
varsity
go,
squad shit.
fuck yeah. Like, yeah, this is, you join the Navy and I would have never, you never thought that you'd get to kind of do things like that.
Yeah.
But the details of all of that is definitely in the right kind of crazy.
Yeah. Can you shed any light on operating against?
Yeah, I mean, operating against comes in varying formats, and but for me, having be a breaking and entering kind of guy, breaking in, into a place can be categorized as two different reasons why you're there, and the first one would be tactical. There's going to be a tactical act against this target. So my job is to maybe sometimes just identify it. I could put an infrared beacon, outside the front door, just so the assaulters know that that's the right one, or it could be that would be more of a tactical approach. A technical approach is the second, right? Meaning I'm going to put a device that in place against the target. And so that's it's either going to be a tactical reason or a technical reason why I'm there. But usually what follows is all going to be just bad for whoever place I just went into. It's not going to be good for them if I got in and confirmed anything about this person, Yeah.
Are there any movies via Hollywood that actually get it right as far as that type of shit, where you can be like, yeah, that's actually pretty fucking realistic?
There are parts of Zero Dark 30 that kind of highlight some of the stuff that, what it takes before the target actually gets taken down. I would even say go as far back as Black Hawk Down. There is one of my good friends and mentors. If you remember that movie, there's a guy standing in the souk by himself doing surveillance, and then later he's got his mountain bike over his shoulder.
Yeah, right at the beginning.
And then he steps onto a Black Hawk helicopter that picks him up on the beach, right?
Yeah.
So that guy became one of my mentors and led me down that more clandestine path, and is definitely just probably one of the smartest dudes, but also the most savage motherfuckers you will ever meet.
Yeah. You think he would come on here?
I could ask him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
tell him we'll give him a handy on the couch.
Yeah, he is. And only the people who know him know who I'm talking about. Otherwise, they'll be like, oh, I didn't even pay attention to that scene in the movie. But that was real, and that was him. And he is a real person who, to this day, last I know, still is just doing amazing things.
Fuck, that's
by
awesome.
himself.
That's fucking cool.
Yeah.
I guess, so beyond Zero Dark 30 and Black Hawk Down, I guess from a CMOE standpoint, the Mission Impossible, James Bond, newer James Bond stuff, like any of that, I know it's all Hollywood and far-fetched, generally speaking, but is there any of that kind of stuff, of the actually getting into targets and doing surveillance or digging through people's desks and picking fucking that kind of shit that you see so often?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you.
Is it like that? I guess.
No. I mean, lockpicking is, hell, I wouldn't even list it as a last resort. A CMOE guy, whether it's it's me, or if you talk to any of our allied countries, and it's a very small world, obviously, we all had really the same mission, and that is to, you want repeatable, reliable means of re-entry, right? Now, you would probably take those words and twist them around into something perverted, but reliable.
Why would you say that?
Reliable, repeatable means of re-entry. You're not going to do that with lockpicks.
Yeah, to me, that means a solid game, right? Just
right. I've got a key.
Yeah.
So making keys to a target is very much an old locksmithing skill. And myself and my CMOE partner, we probably could make a key to a target at the beginning, before we implemented some technology, we could do it in like 7 minutes. Make a key on target, and then now you've got a functioning key that I made just by doing some tricks with the keyway that, you know, in the middle of the night. Later, we started creating technology that, you know, we could have a key made in literally a few minutes or less just with the technology alone.
So if I see you on the Ring camera hanging out on my stoop for a couple of minutes, I'm safe to say you're just making your own fucking key to the house.
Yeah, there you go. You know, but if you do it right, you're taking cameras into consideration. Yeah. And, you know, as you know, I got to play around with the world of disguise, and disguise is definitely mandatory because you have to assume there's an anti-cam inside and that there's a, you know, some kind of camera on the outside.
Yeah, doorbell.
So you have to consider all of that. And, you know, the world of disguise is also a very small but big place. And, you know, I donated one to the Spy Museum.
I saw it, actually. I sent you that picture of me
standing
in front of it.
Yeah, so I put it up there, and then recently I got a letter from a certain agency, you know, that had nothing to do with that disguise, say they're going to just go ahead and take it back now.
Really?
Yeah, so they took it from the museum, and what I heard, they put it in their own museum.
Well, that's fucked up.
So yeah,
shit, it's already been out there. It's not like...
No, it was kind of cleared. You know, it's not like I was doing anything wrong. It's just they just kind of, you know, just decided they wanted it back.
So disguise-wise, similarly, like I think most people, even myself included, thinks of like the active Mission Impossible fucking melts to your face, you know, super high-speed disguise of what you can without getting yourself into trouble. What can you tell us about kind of the disguise game as it relates to?
Ironically enough, it's not stamped secret, right? It's a very sensitive world. But I would say that a lot of that world is no different than what is used in Hollywood.
Yeah.
You know, silicone and there's a lot of different materials that, you know, they can cast a face and mold something to it. You know, it's a process, you know, but it by no means was invented by the United States government, right? I mean, this is a Hollywood thing that was then leveraged, you know, by the government. It's actually really, really kind of cool in its own creative way. And if done right and implemented right, it is foolproof, right? Unless you get caught, like with a mask in your hand, you know, then you're in trouble. But there's a lot of like forethought, right? So, you know, people think of a mask as like it's animated. An animated mask moves, like if my eyebrows move, the mask eyebrows move. My facial features and facial muscles will then, you know, control the mask that's on my face. And then there's the more non-animated, which I would say is like any Halloween costume out there where you buy a realistic mask, you put it on, and, you know, nothing happens when I move my face. So there's a lot of branched off worlds. Even the puppet world plays a role here, because how mechanically your a face moves, you know, can be done by using kind of like puppet engineering. So, like any world, it's always bigger than you can think once you kind of get in there and you start looking around at all these different options. And but it is a great way to secure and ensure an operation, you know, from beginning to end, because you have to assume that technology is watching.
Yeah, anonymity-wise, especially with facial recognition shit that they have now. So, I mean, is it safe to assume then that the animated versions are A, the preferred, and B, the most often used?
No.
Really?
Animated means it implies that you also speak the language, right? So if you no shit can speak that language, then you could get away with maybe an animated, but even then there's a certain amount of risk. You know, disguise is for the most part a distance thing, right? It's a camera thing. It's not a, hey,
blend in,
me and you hanging out together, right? That's taking an unusual amount of risk. It can apply to that situation, but there is distance and other things that are kind of in place, but just so that, you know, you're not identified later kind of thing.